I am often referring to myself as a survivor of child sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, and I've never really talked much about how I have healed. I really want to share that with you, especially if you happen to be a survivor of any form of abuse. I think it's important to know what those people who have had a healing journey have done that has worked, and maybe there'll be something from my journey that can be helpful to you. The first thing that I want to talk about is spiritual bypass because I did some of that in the early part of my recovery. And it's no wonder because I was born into a religious cult that preached a lot of spiritual bypass. So, and then the culture, in a lot of ways, has over the years tended towards encouraging people to forgive and forget, to move on, live in the future, not the past, those sort of things. Some of the other words that will come to mind are things like just have faith or everything happens for a reason. And I am not wanting to try to decipher why these bad things happen. I just know that there is a very specific series of steps that we have to take if we want to get well. And I do want to define, what do I mean when I'm talking about getting well? So when I started my recovery journey 40 years ago, I was anorgasmic. That means I could not have an orgasm. Okay? Today I'm multiply orgasmic. I was angry and resentful and violent and volatile. So it was really difficult for me to sustain human relationships. Today, I have friends that I have known for decades. I have new friends. I have so many friends. Long-term relationships, good, solid connections. And I'm really grateful for that. I have a capacity for intimacy that I did not have when I first started my recovery journey. I also discovered laughter to the tips of my toes, full body orgasms, spontaneity, just a resilience, a joyful approach to life. All of those things came from taking the steps that I took to get well. So that's what I mean when I talk about getting well. Okay, so what did I do? 40 years ago, I got clean and sober. I got into 12-step recovery. I immediately got into therapy. I actually got into therapy a couple of weeks before I got sober. And I know this because the therapist for the therapy group that I was going to, asked me to stop coming drunk. If you can believe that. I was like, well, how am I supposed to deal with being abused as a child if I'm not drunk? Okay, so I had to stop drinking. And I immediately thought, I'm just going to forgive my dad. I called him up and I said, Dad, I forgive you. I don't know if he knew what I was forgiving him for, but I thought that would be that. I'll move on. I'm practicing letting go and forgive and forget, and I don't need to have resentments, and I'm not going to have resentments, and I'm ready to live my life now. And what happened was the trauma and the damage that had been done to me as a child kept showing up in ways that I did not expect. It interfered with my jobs. I was having a hard time holding employment. It interfered with my relationships. I couldn't stay in a relationship for more than a few weeks. It interfered with my sex life. I wasn't able to enjoy sex. It interfered with my emotional stability. It interfered with my sleep. I couldn't sleep without the lights on. And I realized, well, I've got to do the work. I can't just say it's in the past and I forgive. So that's what I mean when I talk about spiritual bypass. It can be crippling to those of us that are trying to recover. Now, I absolutely, positively do not want to indulge resentments. I think my anger is sacred. I think my rage can be righteous, but I see that in the context of having great anger management skills never perpetrating, never being violent, not losing my cool to the best of my ability. And I have a lot of ability because I'm trained in anger management. And I have these years, these decades of recovery. So I know it's a process. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. But it's such an important thing to take that journey. And it's painful. Look, there were times early on when I was under the sheets in the fetal position and couldn't function. I couldn't get out of bed because I was remembering the horrible things I'd lived through as a child. And I understand why some people would not want to do that work. And obviously, you don't have to. But if you do, if you think that you can get the right support, the right help, and I have a few recommendations for that in just a minute, then you can enjoy a much more expansive and joyful and beautiful life, no matter what was done to you. And I just think that's such an important thing to know. So in 40 years, I've done a lot of different types of support groups and therapies. And I really love the 12-step groups because they don't cost anything. And nobody's in charge. It's just a set of principles and steps that people follow. And there's something incredibly healing about listening to the stories of others. So whether it's a 12-step support group or a different kind of support group, maybe one that's being facilitated by a therapist, those are really effective for trauma. And that's actually documented in van der Kolk's best-selling book, The Body Keeps the Score. There's just a few modalities that are particularly effective working with trauma. There's another one called EMDR, which is really just a form of bilateral stimulation. And there's plenty of therapists that are trained in how to do that. But you can also do some bilateral stimulation for yourself, just by tapping your shoulders like this. Something weird about the way the mammalian brain works. This also works on animals, by the way. When you're doing a bilateral stimulation, it's easier to face a trauma in the past. It's not as dissociating, and that's one of the problems that so many of us survivors deal with, is leaving our bodies and dissociating. So, and then the one that I'm particularly fond of, which is internal family systems, and that's IFS for short. Internal family systems really looks at all of us as being composed of a variety of parts. And once I started learning how to work with my parts, oh my God, the level of recovery that I was able to achieve was just off the charts. So I'm such a fan of that form of therapy that I have become trained in it, and I help my coaching clients to heal using IFS. So it's not a journey to be taken alone. It's really important to get a therapist or a trauma-informed coach or a 12-step group or all of the above. And of course, there's some self-help books out there too. For the sexual assault survivors, I want to suggest Stacey Haynes' book, The Survivor's Guide to Sex. It's a workbook, and I have worked every exercise in that book, and it's just a gorgeous adjunct to a recovery journey for anybody who's been sexually assaulted, whether as a child or as an adult. Okay. I hope this was helpful. If there's anything you want to share about your own recovery journey or your struggles around being a survivor, please leave those comments below, and don't forget to like and share. Thank you so much.